So just to sort of demonstrate how we can change the set points, how we can switch things on and off. So at the moment we're off here, so we need to switch on the stirrer. But as we're under external control, this won't run. There's a little switch on the back corner here. If I flick that, the external control comes off. We can now control this manually. Top speed on these is about 1000 RPM. We don't want to do that every day because, as I explained earlier, it does put a bit of a strain on the drivetrain and the motor. But we normally start off around about 200–250 RPM. So we'll just turn that down. Well, we'll pop it onto external control and hand power over to the controller. So we check on here, set point 250, we're off at the moment. To change that to on, we press enter, and off we go. To switch on the temperature control, currently the set point is 37 degrees C. We might want to change that, so to change any of the set points, we scroll the cursor block across and we input a new figure. So let's go for, say, 30.0 degrees, enter to confirm. We now have a new set point. Now to switch on, we then scroll across and on. And if I put my hand on this, yeah, that is starting to warm up. The temperature is interlocked with the agitation, so if for any reason you switch off the agitator, then it'll automatically cut the power to the heating mat. It's a safety device because you don't want this red hot whilst you're sort of taking it off. Right, on to probe calibration. We'll start off with the pH. We need to get a few bits and pieces together. So we disconnect the lead and these are normally held in finger tight, so just unscrew the probe and then very carefully pull it up from the top plate. There is an O-ring that sits in here, so there is a little bit of resistance, and just carefully withdraw it, and there we are. It's a sealed probe. There is an electrolyte gel in here which does discolour, it does crystallise, hence you can see a bit of crystallisation down here. Do not be alarmed, it does do that, and it does work. So we reconnect to the lead and we get our buffer number 7 ready. And we secure the probe in the clamp and pop into buffer number 7. On the main menu, we scroll the cursor block where it's sitting over pH, we press enter and we enter the calibration menu. Across the top is our set point, there is our actual reading, we have our PID terms across here, in the middle are our calibration parameters 0 and gain and temperature. It is indicating calibration error at the moment. Again, do not be alarmed. The first thing we need to do is tell the controller the temperature of the buffer. So move the cursor block down to temperature, and with the aid of a nice little digital thermometer we put that into the buffer. I make that 20.7 degrees. So well, look at that, 20.7, coincidence. So 20.7, enter. So we let the reading settle. So we need to confirm that is buffer 7. So we scroll across to 0 and we go 7.00, enter. And there we are, pH 7. So we can remove the temperature probe. Now this is where you need about sort of 3 pairs of hands. So we get our buffer number 4 ready. We have a beaker, and we also have a squirty bottle of distilled water, and we need a bit of tissue paper. So carefully remove the probe from the clamp, lift it up, pop number 7 at the back, bring in our beaker. We just want to wash all trace of buffer 7 off the probe, so give a little flush with the distilled water, let that drain. With the tissue, very gently dab dry. We get our buffer number 4. Back into the clamp, lower it in nice and gently. We don't need to measure the temperature of that and input that into the controller because we take it as read that both the buffers, they've both been together in the same room, they should be at the same temperature. We let our reading stabilise. We're going to scroll the cursor block across to G for gain, and we input, once it's settled, 4.00, enter. And so there we are, we have it confirmed as buffer number 4. Right. As before, very carefully remove the probe, pop number 4 at the back, bring in our beaker, little swish with distilled water, again to remove all trace of buffer, the dab dry, bring in number 7 again, gently lower in and clamp, and all being well and fingers crossed, it should recognise it straight away as buffer number 7. And the reading should settle down and stabilise at 7. Which it isn't doing at the moment. Right, we need to intervene then, so we move the cursor block back to 0. We reconfirm 7.00, enter. There we are. It's still wobbling about a bit. You weren't doing this earlier when I tested it. Oh, the perils of live TV. Let's try again. 7.00, enter. Might have to let it settle for a bit. Carrying on. We have a third buffer, number 10, the blue stuff. Sometimes to check a probe's performance, we'll pop it in number 10 and we'll see how far up the scale it will go. If the probe indicates about 9.5, 9.6, because this stuff does deteriorate, we won't get it 10 exactly, it says the probe is in sort of fine fettle. But we won't do that today. Oh, it is all over the place. Right, never mind, we'll leave that for a little bit. Oh, I'll pop the cap back on number 4. Right, on to dissolved oxygen. We do this in situ. The probe stays in the vessel, so we escape from the pH calibration menu by pressing escape. Back to the main menu, we scroll down to DO, dissolved oxygen, we press enter, and we have our dissolved oxygen calibration menu. So we have our electrical readout here, nanoamps, our actual percentage, our set point, we have our PID terms here, and our calibration parameters there. So we need to get this oxygenated. So we need to come back out again. We need to get the stirrer going. On. And we need to set an airflow rate. I'm just turning the rotameter up to 4. 1 vessel volume per minute of air, so 4 litres per minute going in for 4 litres of water. We shall return to the dissolved oxygen menu. Right, dissolved oxygen is pretty straightforward to calibrate. First of all, we need to allow this to run ideally for several hours to allow the probe to polarise and settle down. But once we're sure that the vessel is all nicely aerated, we scroll the cursor block down to auto 0. Now we press enter, and very briefly this will flash over to 0 and then back up again. To set 100%, we simply up to G for gain, and we tell the controller the signal that this probe is picking up, and that 59.3 nanoamps is equivalent to 100% dissolved oxygen. So we're on G for gain, we go 100.0, oops, enter, and then that is set in. So very simple, very straightforward to calibrate. Ordinarily you would calibrate both probes prior to setting up the vessel. Once the vessel has been autoclaved, you set it back up on the rig again, and it's running at your your operating temperature. You can calibrate the pH probe again by taking a sample out, check that up on a bench meter, and does the bench meter reading correspond to the reading you're getting on here? If they are one and the same, all well and good. If not, then we can sort of tweak the gain to suit. With dissolved oxygen, again, as it's all done in situ, we can very easily recalibrate that prior to inoculating the vessel. As a check on performance, we have a nitrogen supply plumbed into the benches. This big long tube here is fitted to a nitrogen tap at the back. So we simply turn the rotameter down to off, disconnect the air supply, plug in our tube, and then reach through, turn the tap open to see the nitrogen bubbling in. So the nitrogen is now purging the air from the water. There is a little bit of delayed action, but that figure should start dropping down. Now we could do this in real time, but of course depending upon the age of the probe and various other factors, that will eventually sort of drop down to sort of near enough 0% dissolved oxygen. We can calibrate on the nitrogen, but we normally prefer to do it through the auto 0. This is just a check on the probe's performance. So you can see it's sort of falling away there. So reach in, nitrogen off, disconnect the tube, reconnect to the air supply, and the rotameter back on up to 4. And it will take a little while for it to realise what's going on, and then that figure should start climbing again as the water is re-oxygenated. Right, and that is pro calibration. Any questions, please ask.